Let's start by recording the daily word.
Okay, today is Sunday, October 13th, 2024. Today's word is belong. As spiritual beings, we all belong in the heart of God. A true sense of belonging is one of the best feelings in the world. It's knowing I am at home, fully accepted just as I am, and valued for my unique contributions. Today, I celebrate my belonging as a divine being, a child of God. No matter my station in life, my personal history, or my particular circumstances, I am a valued member of the human family. I extend this understanding to all others. I look beyond appearances and even my own preconceived notions to see my fellow divine beings. I honor their unique gifts, just as I would want them to honor mine. We belong together. We belong to one another. We all belong to the family of God. And from the Bible, I ask not only on behalf of these, but also on behalf of those who will believe in me through their word, that they may all be one. That's John chapter 17, verses 20 and 21. Today's word, belong.
Thank you, Gloria. Okay. Today, I'm going to talk about something that I think is of great interest to all of us. I hope so, because it affects so many of us in different ways. And I'm going to be talking about that. And that is addiction. What? Addiction? Why would you be talking about that on a Sunday talk? Well, because addiction in the outer is simply what it is. It's just an outer occurrence, and it's pretty prolific right now throughout our country and throughout the world in many different ways. There's the addiction to drugs. We all know about that with fentanyl and heroin and morphine and all sorts of other drugs that are used for OxyContin, all these pain medications that are used and misused in so many different ways. You know, we speak a lot about wanting to stop these things from coming into our country. And that's good. However, all the time we spend on trying to make something stop, how about getting ourselves in a position mentally and physically and spiritually where we don't desire these things? In other words, it comes down to supply and demand. If the demand is gone, the supply will end. There'll always be a trickling of demand for something like that, but it's nothing like it used to be and once in our lives. Right now, there is an incredible amount of people who are using these drugs to do what? What are they doing with these drugs? Well, they're trying to alter their mind and they're trying to make the pain go away. Not only the pain physically, but also the pain mentally go away. There's another type of addiction that is prolific in our country, and that is a sex addiction. What? Yes, it can occur. There is a normal sexual appeal. That's normal, of course. That's how we make other human beings. But there's also the idea of using it as an escape, using it as a way to pursue what we think is happiness, fulfillment, when actually what it is more than anything else is just a way to make our feeling within ourselves of not being good enough or not being appreciated enough. And so we look in an outer way to make it make that happen. There's also things that we're addicted to, like sugar high. A sugar high is been known for years. Uh, in medieval times, when sugar was first discovered and brought to Europe, there was a tax placed on it. And what kind of tax was it? It was a drug tax because it was considered a way of changing things in your body, as was tea, because there was a high involved with that. Any kind of idea of altering the normal sensations within our body was considered something that was needed to be controlled to some degree. So they controlled it with taxes. And to this very day, obviously that didn't work out because there's sugar in everything. There's caffeine in every other thing. And so that's what we've done. When chocolate was first used in South America and Central America, it was made as a drink, but not the way we picture cocoa or anything like that. The pods themselves were boiled, and then that mixture in the water was left behind, more like a tea, and that was consumed because there was caffeine within that cacao pod. So there's other ways of being addicted. One of them is that we know of right now is social media, telephones, computers, all of these different ways. TV. Hey, I'm one of those. I know I am. I was raised by a television set. It was my babysitter. It was very common for my parents, usually my mom, to say, your favorite program is on, go watch Howdy Doody, or whatever it might be, Rudy Kazootie, or any of these number of little TV shows for children. Mr. Green Jeans and Captain Kangaroo and Grandfather Clock. And that's what I watched. And I was taken care of by this. I was quiet. I was not getting into trouble. I wasn't breaking anything or trying to figure out how something worked by taking it apart. And so my mom just loved for me to sit in front of the TV. Now, she was addicted to movies. She read movie magazines. She loved the stars. She thought about them a lot. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about her is that late at night, I've always been a night person, always, even as a child, probably from eating too much chocolate and having a caffeine high and couldn't sleep. So what would happen is I would see that blue light in the living room late at night, and I knew my mom is up because she would be watching some late night movie on television. I'd sneak in there and sit down beside her real quietly so that I wouldn't wake up my dad or my sister. And I would sit there and she would say, now that's Joan Crawford. Now that right there is, and she would name all these actors and actresses for me. And as she did this, I started learning more about who the actors were. And she would tell me the last film they were in because she saw it in the movies. And she would keep me up to date on all this. And so I developed a whole interest in Hollywood and all that sort of thing. But at the same time I was doing this, I was feeding a happiness within me that kept me from having to deal with the real world. I was addicted to these, just as she was. It's a way to escape. It was a form of escape. But that's the way it is now. I've told you this before, and I want to tell it again, and this is that I loved to go in Oklahoma City, where I lived. There was a wealthy part of town called Nichols Hills, and all of these mansions would decorate at Christmas time to the nines. Every house was just loaded with all sorts of lights and sparkly things, and it was beautiful. So my family, even as I was a child, we would all pile in the car right before Christmas and drive around through Nichols Hills and look at all these and ooh and ah and oh, look at that and so forth. Well, I wanted to continue this as I became a father and then a grandfather. And I had two granddaughters who I thought they'll just love this. So I put them in the car and away we went from this little town of Guthrie, Oklahoma, and drove about 20 miles and got there, started going from one house to another. And I'm saying, ooh, look at this one. One of the girls is sitting in the back seat and one is sitting in the front seat. And I'm saying, oh, look at that one, look at that one. And I look over there and they're looking down at their lap. Both of them looking at their laps. I said, what are you doing? They said, we're texting. They could care less about any of this. They were addicted to their telephones and they were texting. So then I said, who are you texting? And they said, one another. So there they sat in total silence, texting one another on the telephones. And I was sure they were saying, are you as bored as I am? Yeah, it's just one of those fuddy-duddy things that Granddad thinks is so cool. And it's so corny. I wish we were home so that we could get on our computers and talk to our friends on Facebook. I'm sure that's what they were thinking, but they were kind enough not to do that. But I cut it short and said, okay, let's go home. I heard a big sigh of relief, quietly, but they were sighing in relief, and I knew I'd done the right thing by bringing that to an end. But that's because they were addicted. They were already at that young teenage way addicted to social media and their telephones. Now, having said all that about addiction, and I'm sure there's more of them that I hadn't even thought of that may come to mind for you. And if they do, think about this. None of these things are really harmful. None of them. None of these things are reaching out and grabbing you and making you do them. None of them. Not the television, not the radio, not the songs, not the drugs, not the sexual addictions. Nothing is making you do them. You choose to do them. You choose of your own volition to do these things. Why? Because the mind itself is addictive. The addictive mind is at the center of it all. You know, we have an idea in this country of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then we think that happiness comes from the outer. And so we pursue ways to find it in the outer and ingest it within to the inner world. But that's not really what it is. Our mind is addicted to fear. Our mind is addicted to worry, to the idea of lack in our lives. Our mind is addicted to depression. It is addicted to concentrating on our health at all costs to see what we can take next to improve it, or what we can do next in the outer to improve it. We are addicted to the opinions of others. That's why social media is so strong. That's why we have young people actually getting so involved with the opinions of others that they take their life rather than try to see themselves in any other way except depressed, unneeded, unwanted, unloved. We're addicted to our appearance. We're addicted to our own personal views and whether or not they match up with those of our peers in the world. And I say there's a cure for every one of these. There's a cure for all of it. Switch addictions. That's what we must do. We must change our addictions. You know, Carl Jung wrote this about addiction. Craving for alcohol, or it could be another drug, is the equivalent on a low level of the spiritual thirst of our being for wholeness. Expressed in medieval language, he said, the union with God, the only right and legitimate way to such an experience, that's an experience of this oneness, is that it happens to you in reality, and it can only happen when you walk on a path that leads you to a higher understanding. You might be led to that goal by an act of grace or through a personal and honest contact with friends or through a high education of the mind beyond the confines of mere rationalism. He was speaking to a man by the name of Bill Wilson, who was the author of a book called Alcoholics Anonymous, the AA groups, the 12 steps. He was speaking to him directly because Bill had contacted him in Europe and asked him, why is it that this is working? What is the principle behind it subconsciously that makes this 12-step principles work that I've come up with? Carl Jung read the book and said to him, it works because you have included the idea of seeking a higher power. Because you see, the only way to overcome any of these addictions in the outer is to find wholeness in the inner. It's the only way. You're not going to find it in the outer. You will only find ways to sort of cloud it for a while in the outer, whatever it might be. But you'll not find the real answer that you're seeking until you seek those answers in the inner. The mind is addiction prone. It loves to take things and do it over and over and over until finally it realizes, I'm not getting any of the kick out of it I once got. I'm not getting it any longer. You know, there's an old song called I Get a Kick Out of You. And it says in there, mere alcohol doesn't thrill me at all. And the idea was, but I get a kick out of you. The idea is that there is something in our hearts and our minds that is seeking wholeness. Now, the whole idea of I get a kick out of you and everything is cute. But if we get too far into that, then we get into a whole idea of seeking fullness and wholeness through another person. And that's not the answer either. You know, we used to love to say in our lives, and this would be good for newlyweds to remember, that we called our partner our other half or our better half. But if you think of this, two people together are really a multiplying idea as opposed to a addition idea. You don't add somebody to your life. You get together with them and you synchronistically create something that is greater than the sum of the two parts. So that's like multiplication. Well, what is 1/2 times 1/2? 1/4. You're actually doing things in reverse of what you wish to do. So it's better to think of yourselves as I am whole, and she, he, whoever is also whole. We create between us 1 times 1. 1. We create wholeness within ourselves by seeing the other person as a whole, wholeness, holiness that we are there to support, love, and wish the very best for them, not to get them to agree with us and only us, as once was understood about marriage and wholeness in that way, but rather two people, both of them whole, creating something grander than was ever expressed before, singly. The mind thrives on what it likes and on repetition of that over and over. That's why we like songs that we can repeat over and over, and we can say, oh, that's my favorite song. I just love that song. Or, oh, my favorite program is coming on. Let's see what the characters in that are doing on television tonight. Or we can stream the whole thing and binge it and just watch the entire thing from beginning to end. And why would we want to do that? Because the mind is addictive to certain things that bring it pleasure. Now, here's what the mind is really for. The mind is here to change its pursuits and to switch our addictions from those things in the outer to those things within. And how do we approach those? How do we get there? How do we get to a place where we find wholeness and holiness within ourselves? Practice, practice, practice. The same way that you get to Carnegie Hall. Practice, 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 practice. That's how it's accomplished. But what is it we're practicing? Prayer. Not the old-fashioned prayer of sitting there and getting down on your knees at the edge of your bed, folding your hands together like Frank's got right now and saying, now I lay me down to sleep, and then naming off all the people and all the things we want. We're not doing that at all. That is a beseeching prayer, and what we're trying to do when we are in that beseeching mode is to trap God's attention, trap the outer, and cause it to do our bidding. Well, it doesn't work that way, folks. What really works, and we all know, is to keep in our minds and foster in our minds a positivity so that we can say and align ourselves with God by saying, I see only good. I practice goodness in my life. I reach out to others and I hope deep within myself for them to see how truly magnificent they are. Bringing to ourselves positive prayer recognition of those things in our life which are true about all of us. We are all brought into this life individualized expressions of one presence and one power. We're all important. Every one of us are extremely important. We are not less than anything. We are not more than anyone. Each one of us is important as we are. Meditation gets us to a place in our lives where we are, so prayer is one thing, meditation is the other thing. Meditation brings us to a place in our lives where we are easily, once again, returned back to the center of our being through practice of meditation. It doesn't have to be a long meditation. It doesn't have to be a certain kind of meditation. It just needs to be a stillness where we recognize that we are one with everything in the universe. You know, there was an experiment done where monks who are meditators and businessmen who are extremely high and successful in business were placed in a room, and attached to them were blood pressure monitors and heart rate monitors and brain, and they stick those little things all over your body. And then while they were sitting there, they brought them into a quiet place and they said, just sit here in the quiet for a minute. And after about 2 minutes, a big, loud, blaring horn suddenly went off in the room. They monitored this, and then they watched to see what happened between these two. groups. The men who were the highly successful men who lived in a big city and so forth heard the blaring horn, and their heart rate went up a little bit, and all the different parts of their body that were being tested, their brain waves and so forth, went up a little bit. And then they tested the monks. The monks, when they were startled by this, their heart rate went way up. Their brain waves went extremely high. But here's the difference between the two groups. After a very short amount of time, they continued to test them, and the brain waves and the heart pulse and so forth of the businessmen never went down. It went up and it stayed up. It's almost like it was just waiting for, what's next, what's next, what's next, and stayed up. The brain waves and the heart pulsing and so forth of the monks went back down to normal almost immediately. It went back to a place of calm, peace, and stillness, because that's what they had been practicing. For them, that was the natural state: calm, peace, and stillness. For the businessmen, erratic behavior, high pulse rate, high brainwave activity was what they were used to. So I ask you, which do you want to be? Do you want to be somebody who can bring their pulse rate down to a better, normal place quickly because you have been practicing prayer and meditation part of your day, each day? I read in my telephone, once again, back to that addiction. In my telephone, I have an app from Unity. It's called the BE Unity app. In there is a place for, I can send a prayer, I can go into a form of meditation, and I can also have read to me very beautifully the daily word. I do it every day. It's the most pleasing, helpful thing that I can do every day. Am I a perfect person? Gosh, I hope you don't think so, because I'm just whole. That's what I am, just as you are whole. I am here on this planet to be me. I once was talking to somebody in the music business, and they said, "What's your goal?" And I said, "My goal is to be the next Elvis Presley." That's how long ago it was. That person looked at me and said, "Why don't you just be you? We've already got an Elvis Presley." Ah, what an awakening. What an awakening to just learn to be you. So I invite you, each one of you, allow your mind to be addictive, but to the right things. The things in your life which will bring you true life, true liberty, and really allow you to pursue true happiness. God bless.